All right, let's take a look at my screen here. I have been so frustrated staring at this code for the last several hours. Um, Not sure if you can see this, Sophie, but I have just been so frustrated for the last couple of days. Every time I try to build this, it's just a big pile of fail.
Scott, on line 22, it actually looks like you don't have a semicolon there.
Oh, crap. Are you serious? Oh,
I
man.
am I'm very serious, yes.
Well, that would have been super helpful yesterday. So thanks for sharing that bit of information. That was a big pile of fail right there.
You
Been
know,
doing.
I think it happens to the best of us. And it's really easy to get down on ourselves when we can't figure something like that out. But realizing that those moments kind of propel us into success is something that I think is very, very important. I remember when I was in my undergrad, actually, I was like so keen on landing an internship. And so I like go to a national conference and I'm suited and booted with my resume and I'm like ready to like kill it. And the recruiter asks me one question at like the first booth that I go to. And he's like, what's the difference between C++ and Python? And I just completely freeze. I'm like, I have no, I don't know if it was the nerves or like, I had no idea what to answer. So I felt that career for feeling very, very defeated. But rather than like sit in that defeat, I decided, okay, well, I don't know this. Let me go and like figure out the best way to prepare for this technical interview process so that I am better prepared the next time. So the moment of failure wasn't necessarily stagnant. I think subconsciously I was setting up a system that allowed me to fail, recover, and then get back out there and try again.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is really important. Mindset, I think, is under estimated, and people don't teach us enough about mindset. The majority of the learning process in the West is just grind. Why aren't you succeeding? Well, you're not trying hard enough. So stay up later, drink more Red Bull, and that is how you succeed, as opposed to how I think you and I have learned how to succeed, which is to fail fast and fail often. And I think
Yes.
that comes up a lot when you're like thinking about learning a new programming language or a new concept or a new technology, whether it be Kubernetes or AI or whatever. It's kind of this loop process. When we talked about fail fast, fail often, though you're basically building a system and you're trying to evolve yourself and evolve your own brain as technologies themselves evolve rather. The way that I look at it is this idea of this loop, this inner loop. Like when you're writing code, right? You like write some code, and then you build, and then you run your code, and then you test, and you just kind of loop, and you sit there. And the trick is to loop as fast as possible and make it as comfortable as possible. And they teach you this a little bit in school, and they have like, well, here's the developer on their local loop, and then here's the kind of like larger team loop where you build and test and then do security stuff. And then it goes to deployment and you go like this. These loops, I think, can be applied to our own brains and our own processes when we're like working remotely from home. However, I think these are really idealized loops.
They
And I
look
think the real actual loop probably looks something more like this, which is like write some code, freak out, call a friend, go to Reddit, go to Stack Overflow, check TikTok. Here's cash my paycheck. and but even this right here is a little bit like sterile, don't you think?
Absolutely. I think that we don't realize that sometimes in tech, we can think that things are very linear and very step by step, but the humanization of it is kind of what makes us realize that, okay, there's a lot more steps before we get to the ideal solution. And kind of leaning into that is very, very important. And one of the most important steps, might I add, I think sometimes can be reaching out for help, like the call Sophie, call Scott little sections right there.
Yeah, I think that that's the humanizing part of tech. I think that we again spend so much time thinking about, well, you need to work harder and you need to grind, all of which are important, but the humans are here to help. right? So if I can call Sophie and get help with my $1 million semicolon that I wasted a day on, or you can give me, a text about particular technology, then we can be a part of each other's inner loop. And I know that's why you and I feel so strongly about, community as being a big part of the learning process and that learning loop.
Absolutely. And I think that sometimes reaching out for help, especially in tech, can be kind of demonized when it shouldn't be. Sometimes it can be one of the most valuable things that you can do. And it can kind of allow you to get to the solution in a more productive and efficient way.
Yeah. I think, though, that people might say, and people might say here in the chat, that for new employees, for early in career people, it's really challenging to go and call for help or to ask someone. And, asking for help can be really, really scary.
I think so. And I don't want people to confuse asking for help with just kind of throwing your hands up and being like, well, I don't get it. I don't know. Like this doesn't work. And, allowing others to kind of do your job for you. When I first joined where I work, I tried to ask my questions in a solution oriented way. And this isn't something that I was doing like right off the bat, right? Like this was feedback that I received, right? They were like, well, what have you tried? What was the result of approach one, approach two? And then maybe now we have a working conversation and it's not just me coming asking you to solve this for me. It's more of a conversation of I've done this and I need a little bit more guidance on the most ideal solution for what we're currently working on.
Okay. So you're not saying just like let other people work for you, but we are encouraging folks to call for help. Should I just like bother everybody all the time? And what if I'm new and I feel really like they're going to flip the bozo bit and think I'm an idiot because I keep asking for help?
I think we've all felt like we might be in that situation before, but realizing that every interaction you have in tech, especially when you're asking for help, may not be a net positive, right? You may ask someone for help, maybe they're short on time. And so they kind of just give you like a half answer, or maybe they themselves don't really know what the solution is. And they're just kind of like trying to mask that they do, right? So every experience you have when you're reaching out for help may not be positive. Every resource you use may not suit your learning style. But I think that remembering if the first person doesn't help you, then reach out to someone else. And if the first resource doesn't help, then look for another resource. Find something that works for you and suits your learning style so that you can be the most effective with
Yeah.
your time.
Yeah, there is a balance. There's a balance between knowing yourself and knowing what you know, knowing what you don't know. There's a balance between knowing who you can ask and whether or not you trust them and that they're going to be welcoming. Finding people at work who are cool that you can go like, hey, what did that three-letter acronym mean? I was like in a meeting at where I've been at Microsoft 15 years. I've been in tech for 30, and I'm still like, what does that acronym mean? And you have to find people where you can ask that safely so that they don't just immediately go, oh, well, you should be fired. You don't know that
And
acronym or that technology.
and I think creating that kind of a community is so important because then it allows you to learn in a safe way and grow in a safe way. And it's not like you're creating this like, well, you should have known that. You know what I mean? That
Mhm.
that can get very negative very quickly, I think.
Some people might comment, and I see some comments in the stream here where people might feel like new employees, early in career employees who are in a remote situation, that describes you completely, might feel like they can't really reach out for help. And in the time, a lot of people started working during the pandemic, and fresh undergrads who might not necessarily be social. Do you have to work that muscle in order to like call somebody? Because I know you do your homework before you call. Does that help you when you reach out for help?
I think it does. And I think the scariest part about reaching out is that you don't want to bother someone. You don't want to waste someone else's time. But when you do your homework and you do your due diligence first, you're not wasting their time, right? Because you're coming to them with possible solutions to what you're stuck on. You're not asking them to take time out of their day to start to like go into your code and like code things out. No, no, no. I've done that already. I'm just at a roadblock here and I need a little bit of guidance on how to get over it. So I think that the homework part kind of eases me into thinking, okay, I'm not wasting their time because I've already done some stuff on my end. I just need I need their input. I need their insight. And if you spin it that way, I mean, you're calling me for insight, input. I mean, who doesn't want to give their insight or talk, right? So I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. I think it's also worth pointing out that whether you're later in career or earlier in career, people are going to offer a fresh perspective. And I think whether it be me staring at a missing semicolon and you going, it's there, I needed that fresh perspective. I needed that little bit of a mind shift. So there's a lot of value there.
I think that the beauty in tech is that you can be a complete expert in one area while also being a complete beginner in another. And traditionally, I think in any given field, we usually value this idea of seniority, but I think it's worth shifting the conversation a little bit and understanding what it means to be junior or the value in juniority, right? Because sometimes a set of fresh perspective is really all that you need to kind of go forward. I remember I was a few weeks into this new role at my job, and they gave me a ticket to solve a bug that had existed for like 2+ years. And internally in my developer loop, I'm like in the freak out section, right? Because I'm like, how is this going to work? Like, it's been here for 2 years. Why would they ask me? Like, I'm not going to be able to figure it out. Once I got over that, I started to, kind of figure out, all right, let me get this working locally, reproduce it, read through some documentation. All that to say, within a week, I had something that I thought could work. I had a proposed solution, but it's almost seemed too simple to be true, like too good to be true. But I didn't really have anything to lose, so I just tried it. And to my surprise, it worked. And this isn't me saying like, oh, Scott, like I'm just the smartest, wisest, like bestest person ever. But I think what this is saying is that my unique perspective and background and experiences allowed me to view that problem in a way that clearly no one else had in 2 years, right? So sometimes seeing things through a different lens and entering solutions with an open mind is really key to being able to push the needle forward.
That's a super valuable perspective. I mean, I'm looking here, I've got my degree on the wall, which took 11 years to get. I got my wife's degree. You might think about your certificates and all the Pluralsight courses that you've taken, but my degree and all the technologies that I learned, they're all gone. Every operating system, every programming language other than C that I learned isn't used anymore. So I have to remember that I went to school to learn how to learn, and
Yes.
my life and my processes are learning how to learn. So everybody, I think, is an expert at something. And I love that term that you made up, juniority. We do focus, everyone wants to be senior. Hey, I'm 23 and I've been in coding. I've been coding for a year and a half. Am I senior yet? Everybody's just trying to figure this stuff out at on their own. But everyone's an expert in their own journey and how they learned, and they know you're an expert in yourself, and that there's value in that.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, I think also we should get away from this whole expert pro. And we're all amateurs. We're all figuring this out. I mean, I didn't know. Apparently, everyone's an expert in AI now. Have you noticed this?
I have.
Right? I'm seeing a bunch of people that were marketeers that are now experts in Chat GPT who were in no way involved in the creation of Chat GPT, and they have courses that you can teach you about how it works. It just came out a minute ago.
The beauty of the internet.
Exactly. So if we can accept maybe that there are no professionals. We're just trying to figure this out the best we can. Have you ever felt like people have kind of bonked you on the head at work with their experience? And they're like, I got 20 years experience, Sophie. You should listen to me.
Yes, oftentimes. And I think that it's tough because in a sense, sometimes experience I feel like can help, right? Like, would you agree that it could help in maybe decreasing a learning curve in the long run? But at the end of the day, like you just mentioned, 20 years experience in what exactly? You know?
That's the question. That's the question. Do you have 20 years experience, or is it the same year 20 times?
Right.
Because are you learning? Are you awake? Are you paying attention? Are you thinking about what you're doing, or are you just letting life just kind of like happen by default? I realized really early on that I am just trying to figure out what I'm doing, and things are moving so fast that what I knew yesterday is going to be different tomorrow. So I really try to be present and intentional about my experience. One of the people that I really admire is this fella here. Do you know who this is?
Scott, like many of the conversations we have, no, I do not know
I
who
feel like
he
every
is.
conversation I have is, have you seen this show? Have you listened to this artist? Do you know who, like, you
And it's
know,
me saying, no, Scott, I haven't. And
okay.
then us watching a quick little clip. Okay.
Okay. So this old guy here, not this old guy, but this old guy, is Tim Berners-Lee. He's actually Sir Tim Berners-Lee, Knight of the British Empire or whatever. And he invented the World Wide Web. And what I love about Tim Berners-Lee is that here's a guy who on his like business card it says web developer. And he could have said the the web developer. Imagine like going to an interview and like the guy's like, oh yeah, it doesn't say senior, it doesn't say junior, it literally says the web developer. But he doesn't do that because the web is bigger than Tim Berners-Lee, right? And
Mhm.
I think that that's a really cool vibe. And actually, speaking of cool vibes, check this out. So I was in at Micro. I work in Portland, but I was in Redmond. I'd driven up to Seattle, and I was in Building 42, and we were working on web APIs. And I was thinking about REST, which is like get, post, put, delete. We were talking about HTTP, and this very lovely snow white haired, kind of like Anderson Cooper looking dude came in, and we started chatting with him. And I didn't know, people come into the kitchen, so you're talking to somebody. And
Right.
I'm basically arguing with this guy about how HTTP works. And then he walks away, and my buddy Phil says, "Do you know who that was?" Nothing good ever happens when someone says, "Do you know who that was?" Because whatever is about to happen, it's like that's Nicki Minaj or that was Beyonce, whatever. Like the next thing
Right. Right.
after "Do you know who that was?" is you should have known who that was. And he says, "That's Heinrich. He invented HTTP." And I was like, no, he didn't invent HTTP. You're full of crap. I'm like, no. So then I go and I look up the HTTP spec, and there's Tim Berners-Lee at the top, and there's freaking Heinrich from work. I just thought it was Heinrich from work. And here's the thing, though. He was the nicest, sweetest guy. I'm sitting here arguing about HTTP. I'm basically mansplaining to the guy who invented the thing. And you know what he did? He was just like very Ted Lasso about it. Because maybe I had it in, I didn't have anything clever to say. I had no insight. I had no value to add, but maybe I could have. So he was being, you know who this is, Sophie?
No,
You
Scott,
got
I
to
do
watch
not.
Ted Lasso. I've been sending you Ted Lasso memes. I've been texting you Ted Lasso for months. It's time for you to finally watch Ted Lasso.
I know, I know, I know. I
But
need to
don't
do
you
better.
agree that being curious rather than being judgmental is a good way to be in tech?
I think so. And honestly, no matter how experienced you are, and maybe this is why he met you with such open dialogue, right? No matter how experienced you are, you're always going to, especially in tech, you're always going to come across something that you don't know. You're always going to be stuck or come across a bug or a semicolon that you just didn't see. We all have those moments. And so it's so important not to set impossible expectations for ourselves and just really allow us to have empathy and really move through that and allow us to understand that it's okay. It happens to the best of us, and that's all right.
It does. I appreciate that. You have to have empathy for others. You have to have empathy for yourself. The term that I like to think about when you think about what does it mean to have empathy for yourself is grace. Just give yourself a little grace. We are all beating ourselves up, feeling that we're not moving fast enough in tech, that we're not learning enough, that we're not getting enough certifications, that we're not, um, getting enough degrees or micro degrees or whatever. And all of those things are just setting up these systems for ourselves that are giving us um, unspoken "you suck" signals. I think one of the big ones for me is the pile of books on my desk. Actually, not the McDonald's bag, but the pile of books on my desk right here, which is like a monument to my own failure. These are like all the books that I'm trying to read this week, and like I'm not going to read these books. So, oh, Sophie, what are you doing? Now, let me ask you this: Are you just rearranging those books, or are they
Absolutely.
being read?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I'm rearranged. I'll like read a couple of pages in one, and then I'm like, I am so much smarter now. Let me read a couple pages in the next book. And then it's just like a vicious cycle that happens.
Yeah, because you take the book in the middle and you put it on top, because maybe that'll be the first one you read it, because the order of the books was the problem, right? This is a great
Absolutely.
visualization from Kathy Sierra, who just talks about that myth of keeping up, right? But the problem is we think that if we don't read those books, if we don't watch that Pluralsight course, then we're going to probably take down production, right? Because maybe if I had only read that book, I wouldn't have knocked production over.
You never know. It could have been in book 2
It
and you
could have
didn't
been in
get
book
to it
two.
because it wasn't at the top.
That's right. Uh, someone was really feeling bad about dropping production. They had messed up a table and basically screwed up a production database. So I put this tweet out a while back last year uh, about tales of dropping production. And I think we've all been there. And it's so important for folks to know that those kind of mistakes happen. And it's not your fault for screwing up production.
I love that. And I know that we're talking so openly about not, having empathy with yourself and not setting up these guilt systems, but I have to be honest with you, if I drop something in production, I would feel so bad and I would question everything. But I think that sometimes what allows me to kind of move a little bit more confidently is to set up little things that allow me to be proactive in my workflows so that when something inevitably does break or production inevitably does go down, hopefully not because of me, but when those things happen, I'm able to recover from them quickly and you're not just kind of stuck in those places for too long.
Yeah, I don't think it can be overstated that if you are a junior or early in career person and you took down production at your new job, it is your job's fault because somehow their system broke down, their continuous integration system, their build system, their review system. Why would someone who just showed up be able to crash prod? And inevitably, when these things happen, and they always happen because everybody has this story, it's always a systems problem. So then, what can we do as learners, as developers of all ages and all career levels, to set up success systems? Because if this pile of books is a failure system, it's just here to remind me that I suck. I can make this list smaller, right? I
Right.
can just accept that I'm not going to read this top book and I can move on to the next one. We can do the same thing in software. We can set up systems that set ourselves up for success.
Absolutely. And I think that
No, please.
moving forward in like a kind of like not a hazmat suit, but like, just kind of like bubble wrapped. This is
Yeah,
my favorite image ever.
your bubble wrap suit.
Because yes, I feel like it represents me so well. Just in general, I think that my entire software engineering mindset has just adapted to, okay, how can I test this locally without breaking something? Or how can I test this in production without affecting other people or blocking other people? How can I, right? So it's just like really trying to figure out everything I can do to allow myself to fail. I mean, like, because at the end of the day, do we really know what we're doing?
No, we're just trying to figure it out. Having a bubble wrap suit would be amazing. And the way I do that at work is I just have as many unit tests as possible. Like I just write unit tests until I don't feel bad anymore. Right, which basically means I'm writing unit tests all day long. But do we have any idea what we're doing? No. And this is a great TikTok audio. Like I can't read this slide without actually hearing the music, but it's like time to cosplay as a person who has their together. We're just basically making it up, right? Like we go to work every day and we're like, all right, senior engineer at a big company, let's go, everybody. So here's a picture of two big losers, two imposters. What do you do with that? Because we know we're not imposters, but we still feel it all the time.
And it's so funny because it's like, here we are giving this talk on failure and success systems, and this is what you should do. And at the end of the day, we still struggle ourselves. And I think that the way to work through that feeling is to realize that everyone has these points of doubt, and empathizing with people through those points is what I think will in turn allow us to have grace with ourselves. Like setting up these systems, like we mentioned, will allow us to fail efficiently. Valuing juniority will allow us to keep up with the growth trajectory of tech and keep it inclusive. So ultimately, all these things that we've mentioned, I think will allow us to kind of grow in a net positive way without getting too down on ourselves, even though, and to realize that even though here we are like giving this talk, we still experience those things all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say though if someone says, well, well, if Sophie is an imposter, then there's no hope for me. Like, isn't that just exactly imposter syndrome, like poking at you and trying to make you feel bad? That's what, why do we feel like that?
I think that when you are new to a space, it's okay to feel that way. And what happens in tech is that you're constantly new, right? Because the tech is constantly changing. So in a different industry, you may feel like an imposter for a little bit. And then after you master everything, then you're like, oh, like I'm just Mr. Seniority over here. But with tech, next year, like you mentioned, everything you learned with your degree is now currently gone, right? So you're just constantly learning. You're constantly going through these moments of feeling like an imposter, but it's normal, right?
Yeah.
And taking moments to look back and see, hey, like I've actually accomplished a good amount, right? Like I learned this and I did this and here I am now. And maybe that problem didn't take me, 3 hours this time. Maybe it took me 2.5 hours. You know what I mean? So like just celebrating the little wins, I think is really important.
I love that, celebrating the little wins, but also looking back and saying, yeah, I did that. Like, you must do that. You should set an appointment with yourself almost on
Yes.
Friday and just be like,
On
yeah, I did
Friday.
that. Right. Again, we talk about call back, giving yourself some grace also means celebrating your wins, because remember, it's not a flex if it's true. So if you had a great week and you kicked butt at work or you learned a really cool thing at school, you should be like, yeah, and celebrate that.
And
Double meat at Chipotle for that accomplishment.
yes. And you know what? You just said something. You're like, it's not a flex. But if it is a flex, that's okay too. Sometimes I feel like we need to just lean into like being your best friend or your best friend like a cheerleader for yourself. Like it's okay to do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the other things that I think is worth pointing out when you are giving yourself some grace and you're excited about, I did that, I prepared, and that thing succeeded, that preparation is part of the formula to create luck. And luck is a word that we hear a lot about in tech. We go, this person was lucky and I wasn't lucky. And that's because I don't think we decompose the formula for luck. Because a lot of people, like someone like me, might just say, it's all because I was prepared. I'm successful in tech because I prepared, while ignoring all the opportunities that I was given, which then looked lucky because I was in the right room or knew the right person. But if I was in the right room and knew the right person, but I wasn't prepared, then luck wouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So how many of these things can we control, and how many of these things are out of our control when you think about the luck equation?
Absolutely. I think my favorite part about this slide in particular is the preparedness part, because that's the one thing that you can control, right? So luck comes and goes. It just does, right? There's nothing we can do about it. You may be in the right room, you may not, but making sure that you're prepared so that when luck decides to work in your favor, I think that's where the magic happens.
I agree. I think though that while folks that are maybe watching and listening can be prepared, whether it be by learning, by taking classes, by doing courses, by going to school, by grinding, by doing those things, that's part of the equation, being prepared. You and I were prepared. You busted your butt at school. I was also at school. Um, and then the opportunity, though, we can create for people by lending our privilege. And our privilege could be our position at the company, right? If I wanted to come work for your company, you can create luck for me with a referral. I go, yeah, Hanselman's pretty cool. Now, you're not going to get me the job, but I'll
Right.
bet you if I wanted to come work at your company, you could get me the phone call. And then at that point, an opportunity was created. How lucky was that? If I'm
I love that.
prepared, then the phone call will go well. And if it doesn't, then I was unlucky and I'll do it again. So we in our position as people in the tech community can retweet someone's thing or repost someone's TikTok, and then a lucky thing could happen because we made an opportunity there that they might not have had.
Absolutely. It's all about passing the torch, right? And allowing others to or basically putting down a ladder and not bringing it back up as you continue to climb, you know? I think that's so
Yeah, I,
important.
I never understood that whole thing of like I worked hard and I pulled myself by my own bootstraps. So you should suffer too, right? You don't get to have a garbage collector, Sophie. You have to learn assembler. I learned
No,
assembler and I suffered. right?
Please no.
Those kind of things are just awful. I really feel like we all need to change the vibe in the tech community with a lot more positivity, a lot more grace. This shirt right here that people can see that says work hard at the top, they may be missing the bottom part,
And be
which is
nice.
and be nice. Because the top part doesn't work without the bottom part. It truly doesn't. And that's why you can't look at something like luck and say it's this by itself. No, it's opportunity plus being prepared. And we can control in some way both of those things, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for doing this with me today. I think this was super fun. I always love hanging out with you.
Same. It was great. I think that we always vibe really well and we, kind of just shed some light on the fact of the reality of tech and what it looks like to make it to the other side. And not everyone has everything together, and that's all right. That's okay. You got to work through it.
It is all right. Well, we thank you for hanging out with us. We know that we're going to have a wonderful Tech Skills Day. There's a ton of great people that are all lined up here, but you can find Sophie and I basically anywhere that you get your social media, whether it be Twitter for me or TikTok for Sophie. I'm also on TikTok, was very likely a huge mistake, but I am there and we have a ton of fun together. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.